Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the Can. It is Monday, January 24th. We're on our 5th day of coverage of the Sundance Film Festival. We're so happy to be here. I'm one of your hosts today, Christine Napier, and joining me is the lovely Katy Wang. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
We've been busy watching films. How's it been going for you? With your position at Park City Film, this is what you traditionally do during the festival.
Yes, actually, well, it's nice with a virtual environment because you can, I don't know, it's the good and the bad, right? You can cram in so many films in one day because, of course, you're just tuning in from your virtual theater in your home. But it's been great. There's a great selection this year, and I've been able to get my family involved in watching some films, which is really fun, and just getting some feedback and kind of having that conversation on the side. So a little bit of a replication of what goes on in the line in a normal festival environment.
We've had a similar experience. My family's been there while I've been watching some of them, although I did watch a few at a basketball tournament, which was an interesting experience. Not quite the full experience you want, but we do the best we can. And of course, we want to be prepared and ready for our interviews, and we have even more coming up today that we're very excited about. So let's take a look outside. It's a cold morning, and there is a bit of a change tomorrow. Looks like a small storm is going to be moving through into the early morning hours tomorrow, just a couple of inches maybe, but we'll take what we can get. But in the meantime, it's cold this morning, but dry. Looks to be a beautiful day. And on today's show, we're going to be covering quite a bit, another wide variety of films and experiences. First, I'm going to be speaking with The Cathedral, an incredible story about a young boy's life, just really uniquely done. So looking forward to talking with that director. Followed by another artist. I'm going to be speaking with Isabella "The Machine" Summers, all about her performance and what she's doing with ASCAP. She has composed many things. She really is a machine, so I'm excited to talk with her. Followed by my old school, Katy. You'll be speaking with them.
Yes, so I'm really excited about this. It's a follow-up to Bring Down the House, which is amazing. So really interesting film about climate change, and excited to talk to the directors and about that film.
Yes, followed by We Are Here, which is a short, very powerful about individuals that come here from other countries, especially young individuals who come as children and their experiences. It's a very unique short film, and I'm very much looking forward to talking with the individuals that did that. And then The Mission is another one that you have on your docket today, Katy.
Yeah, so The Mission is an interesting film, particularly for those of us here in Utah. This is about missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that go to Finland, and just kind of what their experience is like there, which is, I think, really be a fascinating film just to learn a little more about that process of how they get to be missionaries, but then also what it's like, what that experience is like in another country, and interacting with other people.
I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. I haven't seen the film, but I've read a little bit about it, and it sounds like the woman who created the film saw some missionaries when she was out for a late night, early morning walk one day, and that piqued her interest and started the film. So really a fascinating take on something that many people here in Utah are very familiar with.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what's happening right here on In the Can. Very much looking forward to speaking about films, and I hope that you'll get a chance to watch some of these films, if not during the festival, maybe afterwards. Many of them have been picked up, which is very exciting news. These films really hope to get distribution, and many of them have, so you're going to hear about these in the coming year, which is very exciting as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for me particularly, in my position, it's great to see these films in festival, but to know that they've already got distribution kind of takes that one layer of, not anxiety, but just kind of uncertainty in terms of like, oh, I love this film, can I bring it back? And when it's got distribution, you know, yes, not sure quite when in that window, but that you absolutely can bring it back. And there's some other films that you get, and it's great when you have opportunities like this where you get to meet some of the directors, and then you can have that kind of sidebar conversation of like, hey, can we bring your film back, perhaps before it's gotten distribution, which has happened many times throughout the years. And it's always exciting to be able to kind of breathe first theater, one of the first, kind of on that cutting edge, and Park City is just a great place for that, of course.
It must be so disappointing to fall for a film and really want to bring it here and then have it not get distribution, but I feel like over the past at least couple of years, many of them have been getting those opportunities with the increasing of streaming platforms. So it is great for someone in your position.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of documentaries in the past couple of years with the pandemic. These are kind of films that people were able to finish at home. And what's interesting watching some of these other the new films that are coming out this year, some of them certainly there's a COVID presence to it, and others you would have no idea that anything abnormal had happened in the last couple of years. So, you know, this great artistry of just how much they had, it's a testament to how long they work on these films, some of these directors, certainly with documentaries, but also how they try to maybe not let, create that sense of magic and not let necessarily the outside world come in on it, but preserve that sense of normalcy that I think, we crave so often through art, right? To get that kind of release, but also to kind of remember what the world was like at one point, and we'll go back to it at some point, certainly. But it's kind of it's interesting mix this year, seeing what that looks like.
That's very well said. I thought about that actually the other day when I was watching a film about, was this filmed during the pandemic, before the pandemic? I feel like now we're framing life in that way. And some bring it in a beautiful artistic way, and others it's not even there. And sometimes you wonder, but it is a very interesting commentary, especially now in the world we live in.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So it's certainly going to be with us, and we'll see an imprint, I think, of COVID on films as they go forward. But yeah, and it just kind of becomes normalized in a certain way. So, but it's interesting to see what the filmmakers have done this year.
And you've watched, I believe you said 20 films. Have any stood out to you?
Well, it's always funny. I feel like when I go to film festivals, I go to the Telluride Film Festival every year as well, and it's the same kind of thing of just cramming all these movies into your head in a very short time period. And it's like, if these films stick with you at the end after seeing 25 films, if you can still remember all the details, those are great films. But I just saw Living last night with Bill Nye. It's a remake of a Japanese film. It was amazing. I mean, just, again, one of those transportative films. It's set in Britain in the 1970s, 60s, a little bit timeless, but just such a beautiful film about humanity. And it just, I don't know, it captured my heart. I mean, there's all these docs that I love, and some we'll be talking about today, but that's one that's it's bubbled up to the top of my list after seeing it last night.
Well, I'm gonna have to make sure to see that. I very much trust your recommendations, so looking forward to that. I know I've watched around 10 films, so not quite as many as you have, and really enjoyed many of them. It's hard to always pick a favorite because they are all so well done. It really seems that way. I think maybe I really loved Brian and Charles, so if you have an opportunity to see that one, I highly recommend that one. Just a really fun story, but all of them, I just feel like it's an incredible festival this year.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, we're going to cover even more films and experiences that you can have during the festival today. Once again, very thankful to have Katy Wang here joining me today. Always appreciate her insight into a film. So we're going to take a quick break and get right to all of that and more right after this. Maybe it's not that uncommon. Welcome back. Right now we are focusing on the film Hatching. It's premiering in the Midnight category at the Sundance Film Festival. Here to tell me all about this really great, creepy, horrific, but very deep actually film is director Hannah Bergholm, and joining her is Sophia and Siri. They both star in this film. So excited to have them all here with us today from all over the world. Let's start with you, Hannah. Tell me more about this film.
Yes, this is a horror drama film, and it's about a young girl who has a influencer vlogger mother who really wants to portray the perfect image of her life and family, and especially of her talented gymnast daughter. And this daughter finds a strange egg and starts hatching it, and out comes something that the mother wouldn't want to see in her daughter.
And Siri, you star as the daughter. Tell me more about your character, about some of the pressure she's feeling and how that likely leads to her decisions in this film.
Eli että millainen sun mielestä se Tinja-henkilö on ja millaisia paineita silloin? Sä voit kertoa sun.
Se on ehkä vähän sellainen ujo ja sitten yrittää miellyttää aina sen äitiä ja ei sit uskalla näyttää mitään sen oikeita tunteita. Sitten sen Allin kanssa se pystyy olemaan ihan oma itsensä.
Yeah, so this Tanya character is very shy and really wants to please her mother, and nothing she does is never enough for the mother, but with the creature Alli, who she hatches, so with Alli she can really be herself.
And Sophia, you star as the mother in this film who also feels a lot of pressure. She has this popular blog. She wants to portray a perfect family, which is very relatable. Tell me more.
Yeah, so she has this blog and she wants everything to look perfect, and she wants everyone to act perfect. She wants to really give the world this beautiful picture of her family. And she has been some sort of ice skater herself, but she has had an injury. So now she's like reliving her dream through her daughter, but really puts a lot of pressure on that poor young daughter.
And how did you relate to that character, Sophia? Were you able to draw inspiration from? And I feel like there were some vulnerabilities there that many people could understand.
Yeah, someone once told me that first you have to get to know the character, and then you have to be able to defend your character. And that part was really, really hard for me. I have 3 daughters myself, and sometimes I had to stop. You know, after Hanna said cut, I had to ask for forgiveness, to tell Siri that I didn't really mean this, because Siri was really young and hadn't done much acting before. So I felt really, really bad for saying a lot of things I said. And so it was really hard to do that role. But also I find, which is horrible to admit, but I did find some characteristics in this mother that I also have, this urge or need to control my kids, and I think a lot of parents will be able to how do you say it, to find those sides in themselves.
I definitely did as a mom, and sometimes it was a bit terrifying because of what happens in this film. Hanna, where did you find inspiration? What are some origin stories that gave you the idea for this film? There's so many different layers and dimensions that I loved, but it also reminded me of some classic literature, to be honest.
Yes, I really wanted this story to be kind of modern fable. So I wanted to have it to have kind of subtle feelings of, for example, grim tales or things like that, in, for example, in the landscape or in the set decoration. But really the whole story and all the themes started from one sentence that our screenwriter had. So our screenwriter, Ilja Rautsi, told me that he has an idea that a boy hatches an evil doppelganger out of an egg. And from that one sentence, we started to develop the story, and I wanted to change the lead character into a girl. And then I started to think that, okay, if somebody's hatching something, it means that she wants to hide some elements in her character. And this theme of motherhood came to this film. So this one sentence was really the starting point where everything started in this film.
Siri, what was it like acting opposite of a creature? Was that hard to do?
I think first it was a bit, but then I got used to it, and it wasn't, well, you just thought it was a real person and tried to act.
And you're very convincing. You definitely bond with this creature, and you see some ways that maybe the mother in your life, that figure, isn't fulfilling your needs, and you're kind of passing that on to this creature. Sophia, how did you feel that this film really portrayed this kind of twisted idea of motherhood, but also these different layers and dimensions that really made this young character that Siri plays so well make some tragic decisions?
Well, as I said, being a mom myself, I do go through these thoughts on a daily basis, like what kind of traces I leave on my kids, and social media, what kind of role does that play in our life and our family. And I'm so impressed that through horror, the genre horror, we can tell this beautiful story. And I think even people who don't appreciate horror movies or even like them, I think everyone can get something from this movie and identify themselves with some aspects in this movie, even this horrible mother.
And Hanna, as the director of this film, what were some of the challenges about this horror genre, and are you planning on doing more horror films?
Well, I actually, I've always been a person who is afraid of horror films. So but because I've always been afraid of them, I found that dealing with fear in this film is very fascinating. And actually it was very enjoyable to make horror film, because in horror film, some of the insides of the character can get kind of external form. And of course, one very big challenge was to really physically create this monster creature, and that was a cool challenge in this film. But yes, I'm equally interested as a director in drama and horror films, but I am actually developing another horror drama film at the moment. So yeah, there's a lot of fascinating things in this genre.
Oh, I'm excited to see that as well. Don't want to miss out on Hatching, just an incredible, terrifying story with many layers and dimensions. It makes comments about motherhood, creation, and also has this really terrifying storyline. And the ending is something that you don't want to miss out on. So it premieres at the Sundance Film Festival in the Midnight category. And thank you so much to Hannah and Siri and Sophia for joining us today. We'll be back with more In the Can after this. Welcome back. Right now we are focusing on the film The Cathedral. It is in the next category during the film festival. Ricky D'Ambrose is here to tell us all about his unique yet beautiful film. Ricky, how are you today? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Doing well.
Oh, tell me more about The Cathedral. This is a film based on your life and a certain time where you grew up. So what made you decide to put the camera, in a sense, kind of turn it on your life?
Well, I was a witness as a 18, 19-year-old to a strained relationship play out at a very unfortunate event, which was a funeral for my maternal great-grandmother in 2006. And I had at that point had a new vantage point on my family, having come home from living away from home for the first time for college. And I think my politics started to form around this time. My sense of who I was in relation to the people I had grown up around had changed, and the country was undergoing changes. So I think these things came together at that time that made me want to use my family in a way, or the relationships between the members of my family, as a locus for a film about my childhood in a way.
And how did you decide what specific events to include in that time frame within this film and this experience? Because something that also is unique about this film and that I really enjoyed is that you utilize coverage of current events as well to help the viewer, perhaps if they were growing up or were alive during that same time, to kind of put all of your events in your life or in this character's life in perspective. What made you make that decision within this film?
I think it had a lot to do, I think a big part of it had to do with thinking a lot about the history in the country, or the events that took place in the U.S. over, say, I don't know, 15, 20 years of the time of the film. Having grown up into a time of peace and prosperity of the Clinton years after the end of the Cold War, bookended by the collapse of the Berlin Wall on one end and 9/11 on the other, had I think a big impact on the way that I think about the country we live in and think about certain ideas and ideals that I grew up with. So it was always apparent to me that at some point, the things that you see in the film, all of these archival clips, the World Trade Center bombing in '93, the Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, that these things would have some part to play, but they wouldn't just be there to give the viewer a sense of the times, which they do, but they're also, I think of them as sense impressions. I mean, they're things that I have very evocative memories of, having heard about them or watched them on television.
And also some of the things that come about in the film are really based on very simple, everyday memories or objects, but really changes things to make a huge difference, which is very relatable as people look back on their lives. And I'm also curious about something else that you did in the film that's somewhat unique, is you have a female narrator that is very unemotional, very straightforward. Did you do that to create this idea that the viewer can decide for themselves in a sense, or just a very, I think the non-emotion is what many people are surprised by.
Having the narrator, it was important that the narrator not be someone who has any relationship to anyone inside the film. The narrator isn't a relative, isn't a friend of the family, or has no relationship to anyone in the film. And I thought it was important for the viewer to have some kind of distance, so that almost the viewer gets a frame, or a proscenium around the film. And part of that, I think a very big part of that had to do with me not wanting to make a movie that came across as a coming of age story, in which you usually identify with the child who's coming of age. Having that added point of view on the film, which the narrator, I think, supplies, was like a tool for me to let the viewer say, let's kind of sit back and take a look at what's going on, without necessarily being invested in any one point of view of the characters.
Something else that really made me think about my memories in particular, and I think anyone who watches this film will consider it as well, is how light impacted what you remember in certain places, and how certain images of light playing off the floor or the walls really impacted how you remember things. And I think that's something you don't always think about, but when you look back on times in your life, light does play a role in that. And I think only a filmmaker like you can bring that about. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I always thought there were going to be parts in this film that would really slow down the story, or slow down the narrative, in which the viewer can get a moment of repose. And I mean, I just said earlier that I didn't necessarily want the people viewing the film to have any particular point of identification, but when you do see those light patterns on the carpet, or even the shadows that appear on the wall, it's another recurring thing throughout the film. You are, in a sense, coming into the point of view of a child. You are, hopefully, or at least I think, kind of bemused by what you're seeing. And also there's a shot in the film that goes on for quite long. I mean, it's a shot of a house painter removing a strip of blue painter's tape, and it's meant to be from the child's perspective. I mean, there's something kind of uncanny, I think, and weird if you're not familiar with what a painter is doing with painting tape to see that. So these things they're important to slow down the story, to be little like bursts or interruptions that allow you to get into the kind of sensual headspace of the child.
It's a story about memory, about family relationships, also about some of those hard relationships that come about, coming of age, all those different things. It's already premiered in the festival, and it has more dates to watch coming up. What is the feedback that you've heard back after people have watched this, and how are you feeling?
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic about the way that the film is being taken so far. I mean, one of the things that's been heartening to hear, and I think it's given the fact that the film is so personal and deals with the personal relationships and memories of my own, it's been reassuring to hear from people, from viewers, that they are able to in some way relate to it. And that's not, that isn't to me the most important aspect of the movie, is that other people relate to it, but something that could run the risk of being very insular and private and inaccessible, because they are my own memories and they are so particular to me. I'm just pleased to know that those things aren't that foreign or alien to other people. So that's been, I think, an encouraging thing, and it's made me feel good about how the film is playing for people.
Well, congratulations, Ricky DeAmbrose of The Cathedral. It is definitely a spectacular, beautiful film that'll make you think about your memories, growing up, relationships, and much, much more. Very excited to see what is next for Ricky and looking forward to watching even more of his films coming up. So head to the Sundance Film Festival website. You can still get tickets for The Cathedral, and I hope that you will. And thanks to Ricky for spending time with us this morning. We'll be back with more right here on In the Can after this. We are back with more In the Can right now, joined by Isabella Summers. She's a musician, songwriter, producer, remixer, has done many great things, and is participating in ASCAP during the festival this year. Isabella, thanks for being here today. How are you?
Good morning.
It's great to see you. Love that you have time to be here with us. So tell me about what you'll be doing with ASCAP this year during the festival.
Well, actually, we just had a small interview. I don't know when it's coming out. I'm sorry. I should know more information. That's so far what I have done with ASCAP.
So tell me a little more about the interview. We're definitely looking forward to being able to see that, and why ASCAP wanted you to participate in this.
Oh, well, because I've scored a film for a lady called Phyllis Nash. The movie is Cool Jane, and it is set in the late 60s, and it's starring Elizabeth Banks, and it's about the beginning of abortion, and it's a very important subject, I think, for women. It's still a subject that's got a very backwards viewpoint in America, as far as I can tell. So I really wanted to be a part of it, and it was an amazing thing working with Phyllis. So ASCAP asked me to sort of talk about that a little bit deeper.
So tell me more about the process of scoring that film called Jane. How did you go about that, and did you do it a little bit differently than some of your other projects?
Well, it was my first movie that I've ever scored, which was a shame on some levels because we had to do it remotely. And Phyllis is a very hands-on director. There was a moment in which we made things that she wanted to kind of fit in with these amazing, like, protest girl singers from the 1960s, which was obviously extremely fun for me. And then we broke it down to me playing simply the piano, and so there's quite a lot of diverse stuff in this score. It was quite frustrating doing things not in a room with the director, but the process happened quite seamlessly, and here we are.
Well, congratulations on scoring your first film. I had no idea that was the first time that you've done a film. You do an incredible job. Have you seen the finished product, and what do you think?
I think it's fantastic. I think Phyllis is a genius, and I'm extremely excited for everyone to see this movie.
And tell me more about your background and what got you into this industry to begin with.
I always had a love for cinema, and I mean, I love music in general. I come from a background of record collecting and listening to all types of plays and theatre. I almost went to drama school and ended up at art school, but also, was making music the whole time because I wanted to be the badass female producer. So I love things like John Barry's scores early on, and I'm born on Halloween, so lots of kind of like indulging in the darkness, as it were. So a lot of things came into the melting pot. I accidentally made a band with Florence Machine. We then toured for a long time. 14 years we've been touring, and Then I met a man called Sam Levinson, who put a piece of my music in his movie, Assassination Nation. And then that's where I got the taste for scoring. Then I did a TV show, Little Fires Everywhere. From that, I did several TV shows, and now here we are with Cool Jane.
So I absolutely love Florence Machine, one of my favorite bands. How do you accidentally create something like that?
Well, I think we didn't really think particularly we were making a band. I think it was just two girls coming together making weird sounds, and it was such a strange time because we made such great friends in that moment that we didn't really look like the conventional bandmates, and I certainly had no intention of being in a band. So, but when we started making this music and it was so powerful, like, I don't think there was much of a choice. We just sort of went with it and just kept going with it. And I sort of didn't really think ever that anyone would kind of buy into it. And I was wrong.
And here you are. That's such a great story, but really indicative of life and how you take those opportunities, even if it's not what you expected. And of course, your nickname, The Machine, is from that. But also, I'd like to think that you got that nickname because of the incredible success you've had in this industry and the many different projects you've done. Would you agree?
Thank you. Yes, I certainly have earned that title now. That's for sure. I am something of a factory at this point.
So what's next? Are you working on anything that you can tell us about? Do you want to score another film? Of course, you mentioned television shows that many people are very familiar with that you've scored as well, but what are you working on?
I'm actually working on several projects. The things that are immediately happening are I'm scoring a film for Sony Pictures, Lady Shatterley's Lover, which is going to be wonderful. I'm doing my first animated movie, which is a movie called Hit Pig, about a pig who's a hitman. And I am scoring a television show for Paramount called The Offer, which I think is due to come out in spring. And we've got a second season of a couple of shows that I did last year, like Physical and Sex Life. So there's lots of things happening.
How can we follow along with you and make sure we don't miss a single thing that you're involved in?
Oh, I need to get better at Instagram. Let me get better at Instagram. I do need to stay on that.
Well, I'd say you are quite busy, but an absolute pleasure to meet you, Isabella Summers. And make sure to head to ASCAP website. You can find that interview and more and learn all about the film called Jane that Isabella Summers scored. Really beautiful film, just did an excellent job, and we appreciate her time with us today. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome back to In the Can, coverage of the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. We're excited now to be joined by the director of My Old School, Jono Mcleod, which is showing in the documentary premieres section of this year's festival. Jono, welcome.
Hi, Christine. How are you doing? Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you here. So your film is the story of about Brandon Lee, a 16-year-old secondary student who made his way into the hearts and minds of his fellow students and teachers in Glasgow. But there's so much more to this story. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit what it's about.
Yeah, I'll give you a big spoiler first up, shall I? I am a pupil in Brandon's class, or was, in 1993 when I was 16 years old. This new kid walked into my classroom, my high school classroom. His name was Brandon. He came from Canada, and he had come to live in our town following the death of his mother, who was an opera singer. He basically came to kind of start his life again. And kind of over the course of the next 2 years, managed to go from being a bit of a geek to sort of climbing the social ladder of high school life and really triumphing. And then he was unmasked, and we all found out how it was he'd managed to do that so successfully.
It's a fascinating story, of course, but how you tell the film, I think, is also equally fascinating. So we do have a little clip that we'll show here to the audience.
I still remember one of the teachers saying to us, "Look at Brandon. He's 10 times better than any of you wasters.
He was one of the better pupils and was a potential E candidate.
Sir, I have a question.
You asked Mr. Gunn to define time.
Of course, I mean within the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum time.
We all just kind of looked around and went, what?
I don't think I would have given him much of a response in a class, because we have no idea of how time works, really, or what the concept of time is.
But surely the paradoxes that relativity introduced mean that travel can exist within space-time or the multiverse.
Well, Brandon, the idea of going back in time is something that has appealed to people through the generations. But the evidence that it's not possible is
that we haven't seen anyone from future.
So the way that you use animation in this film is quite unusual. We did see Flea last year at the Sundance Film Festival, which uses a similar technique, but you certainly use it kind of in a different way, and it's so brilliant. Tell us why you chose to make the film in this way, using animation in the way that you did.
Yeah, it feels so strange to be following in the footsteps of Flea, really, because another film about a guy in high school where a stranger comes into his class and he makes an animated documentary about it years later and ends up at Sundance. So I'm very aware that I'm treading behind them. The animation really came from sort of pandemic kind of rethinking sort of thing. I went into making the film thinking, oh, I'm going to make my movie and I'm going to shoot period reconstruction and, you know, all that. And A, someone explained what that meant budget-wise, and B, the pandemic hit and the idea of getting a bunch of people together in a room to film things was challenging and just was beyond our means. So we tried different ways. We did a bit of screen testing where we filmed actors and used rotoscoping animation over the top of them, and we just couldn't get it to land. And it was some lockdown binge watching of Disney Plus's WandaVision, which is a TV show, Marvel TV show, where they perfectly recreate the different eras of American TV sitcom through the ages in each episode. And I was so blown away by that idea that kind of got me to thinking, is there a way we could do something similar, but with the styles of animation from the 90s era, and spoiler alert, slightly earlier. And so kind of that got me to thinking about that. And, you know, if you're dealing with your lead character who has big brown curly hair, glasses, and is in a high school in the 90s, then you can't get away from Daria, MTV's Daria, who is a total icon of that time. And so I kind of took that as the jumping off point. We were looking at Beavis and Butthead for like kind of shapes and stuff like that. And yeah, I was pleased I got to it actually, because what I realized was the way that an audience can connect with a cartoon, a simplified cartoon, a couple of circles and a line, is so much more kind of intense in a way than they could if I had tried to force the idea of, you know, young actors playing the younger versions of ourselves.
Well, it's brilliantly done, and I think you're right that there is this way of connecting. In the United States, certainly, animation is seen as kind of the realm of children, but certainly in other countries, certainly in France, as an example, you know, animation is for all ages, and it's a much more mature medium, and I think you elevate it in a way that is quite compelling. I think, as you said, that you can kind of get into the story and suspend your disbelief. You know, get to see your classmates as they are in their current age, but then kind of go back in time with them in a way that is quite compelling. There's another piece of the film that I think is quite interesting, Alan Cummings' role. You know, how did you get him to be in the film, first of all, because he's amazing, and it's a great addition to the film, but can you talk a little bit about what he brings to the film, which is also another unique aspect that you've done with your film, which I think is quite brilliant.
Yeah, so the real Brandon, you know, wanted to share his story, and he's told his story in various means over the years, perhaps not to this kind of extent where we've reached out to people this much. But his stipulation to me in exchange for an interview was, if I could find a way to make a film where he did not have to appear on camera, he does not want us to see what he looks like now, then I was free to kind of go and make that happen. Now, I'd always had in my head, there's a movie called The Arbor by Cleo Bernard, which really successfully used lip sync to tell an amazing story. And so I always knew that was an option. And that was the key option, obviously, if he didn't want to appear on camera. I just didn't, at first I was like, how on earth do I find an actor who can do this? Now, in the back of my head, part of the sort of lore of this story in Scotland is that back in the 1990s, not long after the story broke, Alan Cummings was attached to both star as Brandon and direct a narrative movie about this. And it kind of fell apart in the way that a lot of movies do, and to my mind became one of these kind of great unmade Scottish movies that you always heard about. So I always knew that I was heading to a point where I needed a 50-something Brandon to play this role. And as luck would have it, Alan is a friend of mine. And then it was just that embarrassing thing of asking your friend to do this thing for you. I don't really know. I think I'm making a film. I don't know what it's going to be. Alan, would you possibly do it? And because of his connection to the story, and I'm sure partly because of his connection to me, he agreed to do it. But I mean, I milked that for everybody in the film. Pretty much every voice actor in the film is a friend of mine who I kind of cornered into doing the parts, from Lulu to, you know, the rest of the kind of Scottish-based cast.
Well, you've got an amazing cast of friends and certainly a lot of characters in this film. Thank you so much for joining us, Jono Mcleod. This is My Old School. It's premiering in the documentary section of the festival, and I hope folks will will tune in and watch it, because it is definitely one of the films to see for this festival. We'll be right back with more of In the Can.
Welcome back. Right now I have two directors joining us of We Are Here. This is a short film in the U.S. animated section. Domenica and Constanza Castro are directors of this film. Really incredibly moving. Looking forward to talking with them both about it. How are you today?
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. We're doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Tell me about how you decided to go forward with this film. It's a film that focuses on young adults under 30 who have come to this country in different ways. So tell me more about how this was conceived.
Yeah, we wanted to share the expression of a system as it is experienced by the people that it's created for, so immigrants. And so based on that, and as immigrants ourselves, we wanted to be able to shine a light on what it's like to walk this land in the shoes of an immigrant under 30 years old.
And we actually have the trailer of this film, which I want to show right now to give our viewers some context, because you do this in such a unique way. Let's take a look.
I had just turned 12 years old when I came to Las Vegas. I just had a lot of hope. Everything felt very new to me. I truly believed that if you worked hard, you would succeed.
I always kept my status to myself.
There really is no pathway to citizenship.
My biggest shame was to not be a part of America like I thought I was. I was just an outsider.
Now, as you can see from that trailer, this film is animation with these stories that you can hear behind this animation. What made you to decide to go about this film in this particular unique way?
We wanted to find a new way of arriving at this conversation, and we thought that animation offered the possibility of using very, like simple imagery to convey a feeling. And so we wanted to use shapes and colors and let the music sort of guide you into this experience and allow for these stories to resonate in a different way. And the animation that Cecilia Reeve created for the project was truly exactly what we aimed to achieve, and the music that Jesse Nelson created sort of allows you to enter into this experience, and so we had a lot of fun making the film and collaborating while we were all in different parts of the world and coming together to tell this story.
Were you inspired by any other similar films, or are there filmmakers that you really hope to emulate, or did this just feel like something entirely unique to the two of you?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of filmmakers that we admire, but I think we wanted to create something that we hadn't seen before. And all of the animation is hand drawn, and we wanted it to feel extremely human. And I think Cecilia's animation, she's an artist, and it kind of feels like you're in a painting in a way, which is one of the things that we wanted to explore.
And we never show the face of anyone because we didn't want the experience of seeing a person to sort of taint the opportunity to actually listen to their stories.
And after watching the film, I feel like the animation really enhances these stories that are quite heartbreaking. How did you decide who to include? How did you find the individuals? I believe there's 3 that are in the film, and was it hard to decide which stories to tell?
There's actually 4 stories total in the film. At the beginning, there was 5, and we had to cut one out that didn't really fit the overall arc. These are people we know, and we reached out and we were like, hey, we really want to honor and tell your story. And we're just so grateful that they trusted us with their stories.
And I don't want to spoil anything, but these stories are very heartbreaking. What do you hope to change, especially after people see this short film and start a dialogue about these incredible individuals with these very challenging situations? What would you like to see become of this?
We hope that the film allows us to enter this conversation from a new perspective, from a place that once you've seen their humanity or hurt their humanity and feel a stronger connection to their stories, that this, the conversation will be approached differently, and that perhaps perspectives are slightly or really changed.
And these are stories, as you mentioned, that you hear every single day. And some of these individuals it wasn't their choice to come here. It wasn't their choice to have some of these things that happened to them. And at the same time, also, some of them are being made an example. So I feel like one of the things that I really got from this film was to look beyond and to really think about the humanity and have compassion.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That's really, I think empathy and compassion is definitely one of the takeaways that we hope people take, and eventually create change. A lot of these laws, I think, are made without really thinking about the long-term impacts that they have in the lives of the people who they're made for.
And what is next for the two of you? Do you have other projects that you're working on or hope to be working on soon?
Yeah, we're actually gearing up to run season 2 of a director's mentorship program that we ran last year in collaboration with Indeed and Lena Waite's Hillman grad. So that is coming up where 10 BIPOC filmmakers get $100,000 each to create a short film. And so that's what's coming up really, really soon. And
the name of the program is called Indeed Rising Voices. And last year we had 10 incredible filmmakers come out of the program that are doing amazing, amazing things, including actually at Sundance there's another short that we executive produced through the program called Huella, directed by Gabriela Ortega, and that short film came about from the program.
Well, congratulations, Domenica Constanza Castro, for getting this film into the festival. It's a beautiful, again, heartbreaking film that will make you really think, and I hope that people will watch it and open up these important conversations that we need to have. The film's about 9 minutes, so it doesn't take too long, and once again, it's in the U.S. Animated Shorts section during the Sundance Film Festival. So really appreciate both of them for being here with us today. We'll be back with more on In the Can after this.
Welcome back to In the Can, coverage of the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. We are now excited to be joined by the director of The Mission, Tanya Anderson. Her film will be showing in the World Documentary section of the festival. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, it's wonderful to have you. So this is a film that's kind of gives an intimate look at young missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, who were sent to Finland to try and convert people who are quite different from themselves. Can you tell us a little bit how you came to tell this story, and why, of all the places that the LDS Church sends their missionaries, why Finland?
Well, I live in Finland, so that's the easy part of the question. I've been living in Helsinki for 10 years, so that's why I was particularly interested in filming missionaries coming to Finland, and why LDS missionaries. I came across them about 5 years ago. Actually, missionaries have I've been aware of LDS missionaries in my life, my entire life, and when I came across them 5 years ago in rural Finland, I got to see it was a special moment, but I got to see the kids for the first time behind the suits in a chance encounter, because they were having a conversation just themselves, and I was kind of eavesdropping, and then it just kind of, just spiraled from there, basically. I was wondering, what do missionaries do, when they're not out on the streets talking to people? What do they do when they're, just resting? Do they rest? What do they eat? All sorts of questions. And, and then a few years later, we now have a feature documentary and premiering at Sundance, which is wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, exciting, and congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, being a missionary, it's a challenging experience. I think as we all can appreciate, having seen missionaries around the world, and the idea of going into people's homes and talking to them, bringing a message that maybe they're not ready to receive in some parts. So it's very challenging in that sense, but also very isolating, I would think, to be in a country that's not your own, even if you speak the language, which the missionaries are famous for being quite fluent in other languages. Do you talk about how they prepare for that experience, and how do they deal with that stress and isolation once they're in the country?
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing all this stuff up, and that's definitely part of the appeal for me, or the draw, I should say, in wanting to document this, because yes, these young people, they do remarkable work, and they do it from the heart, and they put everything into doing this, and they're also under a lot of pressure, and I know they love doing the work that they do, but it must be hard to be far away from home and doing everything in a whole new language. And the Finns couldn't be in a way more difficult people for LDS missionaries, because they're quiet, they're independent, they're private, they don't want to share much, especially about their beliefs. So it's a hard gig, and I really wanted to document that coming of age process that they go through, and how they deal with all of this external pressure. And yes, and we do document the whole mission. So from the time when they're in the States, from the time when they're preparing, and they go to the MTC and the Missionary Training Center to learn Finnish, and then the whole journey for them to go back home as well and see that sort of counterculture that they experience, or that what's the word I'm looking for? That sort of come down after the mission, after they've been serving for 2 years.
Right. I guess how they reassimilate back into their home culture, and having this
right.
kind of displaced experience, right, for 2 years. How did you gain their trust? I mean, your story of just kind of meeting them on the street, and being fascinated by the story and wanting to tell it, to get in as close as you do. Take some work. Can you talk a little bit about how you got to gain the trust of these 4 missionaries that you end up following, to be able to tell the story to the depth that you're able to?
Sure. Yes, thanks for the question. It took a long time to get the church's trust first and foremost. There was many emails about a year and a half's worth before we got green lights to go ahead and be in touch with the next group of missionaries heading out to Finland. And shortly after they got their call letter to where they found out that they're going to Finland, I got a chance to interview the whole group. Basically, everyone was expressing an interest to be a part of the documentary, and then out of those 14, then I narrowed it down to 6, like really wonderful people with great stories, with great personalities. They were easy to talk to, and then we went over to the States in June 2019 to film these 6, and then we kind of got to see a little bit who is best on camera. But again, lots of Skype calls. Zoom wasn't such a big thing a couple of years ago, but lots of conversations, and conversations with their parents as well and their families, and just to kind of really explain kind of what we're doing, and that we're here to document this incredible journey, this hero's journey, essentially, that these kids are on. So yeah, lots of talking, basically.
Well, it's interesting that you're premiering that, of course, here, not at just Sundance, which is, amazing, and congratulations again for that. But also, we are here at kind of the heart of the LDS Church. So, kind of that interesting parallel to be here in Utah. Have the missionaries had a chance, and their families had a chance to see the full film? I know in other times you'd be all together celebrating at the premiere, but have you had a virtual kind of presentation with everyone?
Yeah, well, we actually sent the movie to the 4 missionaries a couple of months ago, when we were soon to be when basically the film was finished, and so they have seen it. Of course, like, these are young people, and we want to make sure that they're as best prepared as possible, because this is now their faces on a big screen, and so we wanted to make sure that they got to see the final cut. And yeah, I am so heartbroken not to be there in person. I was really looking forward to sitting next to them and crying and watching the film together, just so that they could have a chance to share this experience, with their friends and family, with their community, with their home media. But we get to do it virtually, and we'll be on a live Q&A later this evening, or this evening for Finnish time, but later this afternoon, Utah time.
That's exciting. It's always fun to see in the Q&As, just everyone it's kind of like a family reunion. I've seen so many, I've seen about 20 films so far, but just the camaraderie and that warmth kind of comes through the screen. So really looking forward to seeing the Q&A with all of you this afternoon. What do you hope that the audience takes away from this film? It's very personal, but it's also universal in some senses. So what do you kind of hope that the community writ large walks away with after seeing your film?
Yeah, I think my goal with this film was to really share, for the audience to maybe feel what it's like to be in the shoes of some, LDS missionaries, just for a little bit, just to get that. Hopefully that feeling comes across, and of course people can walk away with any opinion that they like about the whole thing, but it was more to convey that feeling, just what it's like, and yeah, that was my main goal with the film, and I hope we succeed in that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Tanya Anderson, she's the director of The Mission, which is in the World Documentary section of the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. We'll be right back with more of In the Can.
Welcome back. We're going to take a break from our film festival coverage to take a look at our weather today. There's a change coming, but right now it's a beautiful, cold, crisp morning out there. Blue skies abound right now. At least looks to be somewhat of a bluebird day to start. 13 degrees is our current temperatures right here at our studios at Park City Television, and the high will be 33 degrees with more sun. And then tonight, Overnight, the low is 12, and that's when there's a very slight system that's going to brush our way. So let's take a look at our 5-day forecast. So that system, it's actually so light, it's not even showing up on our forecast, but you should see some snow tonight into tomorrow morning. Not, I think 2 inches that I said at the beginning of the show is a little too much. Maybe at the highest elevations of the resorts, we'll get a couple inches, but down here, you should see some snow on the ground tomorrow morning. So be ready for that, but it doesn't look to be a significant amount. After that clears out, return to very similar weather throughout the next few days. Wednesday, Thursday, the highs both 29. Very cold lows, though, down to single digits. Friday, a little bit warmer, still pretty cool with that low being 6, the high 35. And then Saturday up to 37, and the low is 12. It looks to be that after this small little system tonight, our dry spell is going to continue until the beginning of February. So fingers crossed we will get a more active weather month in February than we saw in January. Let's take a look at Salt Lake City and see, actually, we are going to take a break and get back with more films. So another beautiful shot from our roof cam. Very nice day right here locally. I hope that wherever you're tuning in, you're also having a lovely day as well. But we're going to break and get back with more films right after this.
Welcome back to In the Can, coverage of the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. We are now joined by the director of To the End, Rachel Lears. We're welcoming her back to Park City. And she's joined by Alexandra Rojas from Justice Democrats, who's one of the subjects of the film. Rachel was last year in 2019 with her award-winning documentary Knock Down the House that went on to win the Audience and Festival Favorite Award, as well as an Emmy nomination, and was shortlisted for Academy Award. So welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
So this film is in some ways a follow-up to Knock Down the House, but it's also a powerful film about climate change and climate action that is really unlike anything we've seen recently in this kind of film genre. So could you tell us a little bit more about the film and why you chose to tell it in the way that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, it grew out of our work on Knock Down the House, but it is a very different story. It's a darker and more complex story in a lot of ways. We were working on the post-production of Knock Down the House in the fall of 2018 when the UN's IPCC report came out, showing that the world scientists had definitively approved that climate change is real and happening and causing huge trouble. And we have until the year 2030 to make really enormous changes in all aspects of our society and economy to avert the worst effects. And it's really at that point, it became a question of political will. This is what the scientists were saying. And that was what really caught my attention and made me want to focus on what it looks like to get involved in the political process in the United States to turn around the biggest historical carbon emitter in the world, which is the United States. And so there's no solution to the global climate crisis without some sort of path through politics in this country. So we look at 4 remarkable young women, women of color who are leaders in the movement for a sustainable future, and particularly for the vision of a Green New Deal, which would be a bold and a solution to the climate crisis that addresses economic and racial inequality in the process.
So there's so many great quotes from this film. I mean, I was just, writing things down the whole time I was watching it. But one of them that really struck me was when one of the people in the film says, "Moments of crisis crack open the window of opportunity." And I wonder if you could speak to that, each of you could speak to that, certainly Alexandra, how this moment, how this pivot in politics and an understanding of climate change and the rapidity with which it's kind of taking over our world maybe motivated you to take action in a way that you hadn't before.
I'll go ahead. Well, I think that do we have Alexandra back? Sorry, looks like we lost her for a second.
Oh, there she is.
So I think that for me, you know, I have been involved in movements for justice and inequality for a long time, but I have a 5-year-old child now. He was 2.5 when we started this film, and I really feel like I have no choice but to be part of some kind of solution to addressing this problem. So the film is really, you know, it's an epic story. It's it's an exciting story. It's character based. It's got a really driving narrative, and it's really a film for anyone who likes a good story and wants to have a serious conversation about these issues.
Alexandra, can you tell us how you got involved with the film, and kind of what does it mean to you to be a part of this conversation? Certainly, it's building off the work that you're doing and bringing to the spotlight. You know, yeah, just talk to us how you got involved and what you kind of where you hope the film takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, by the way. And yeah, I've known Rachel for almost 5 years now. So she has really seen at least the start of, you know, me getting involved in politics, which was through Justice Democrat. You know, it was originally through Bernie's campaign, and then back in 2016, where I met a lot of the incredible other super volunteers and co-founders of Justice Democrats. And she was interested in following the stories of all of these incredible candidates. And so I have a lot of trust in Rachel herself as a filmmaker and someone that is really dedicated to the progressive movement and telling the stories that not everybody wants to cover. So I'm just really grateful to have been a part of it. And what I think was the second part of your question, which is what I hope this film gets at or accomplishes, I think is just continuing to highlight what I think is the very raw, real, and underdog struggle of, you know, not just taking on, and at least, you know, through the work that I do at Justice Democrats, a lot of times these corporate establishment Democratic incumbents, but also the power structures and decades of establishment institutions that cater towards, you know, major corporations or special interests like the fossil fuel industry, and, you know, what it's like to be one of, you know, a few everyday people, because there's so many people. We stand on the shoulders of giants who are taking on this fight in a new form, talking about a Green New Deal, an intersectional approach to, you know, climate politics, and instead of just wonky terms, but actually talking about all of these intersecting crises at once and taking on those power structures directly versus just debating the solution. So we're, you know, also grateful to shine whatever light we can on this issue, because it's really important for all of us and the people that we love.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like about the film is that it's so honest, almost brutally so. There's a scene where you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where she's in front of a rally and she says, "We may not succeed, but we must try." You know, if you could talk to that a little bit, Rachel, about the hope that this film brings. You know, it's such a big issue, climate change and climate action, that you know, it's easy to just kind of despair. And this film absolutely is like, no, that's not an option, which is what I really love about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really pinpointed what we're trying to do with this film, which is to confront that feeling of despair or overwhelm that this crisis can produce, and really look at it from the place of, here are people who are staring that in the face and finding the courage to act in spite of that, and the courage to try, even without knowing what exactly is going to come of our actions, right? There's a dignity and a courage in trying. This is a fight that is going to be happening over the next years, over the next decades, no matter whether any individual person is involved in it or not. And we all have a choice as to which side of it we're going to be on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. That was Rachel Lears, the director of To the End, and Alexandra Rojas from Justice Democrats. This is a film that will absolutely be in theaters. It is so inspiring, and thank you so much for the work that you do, not just on this film, but on behalf of all of us and of our planet. So this is a film that's going to premiere in the World Documentary section. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with more of In the Can.
And that is it for this 5th show of our Sundance Film Festival in the Can. Really, once again, enjoyed everyone we got to talk to today.
Absolutely. I mean, just so inspiring, and the breadth, certainly, of the films that are coming to the festival again this year, but just the amazing talent. There are a lot of first-time filmmakers. I feel like there's more than in any other year that I've been here. Certainly people that are returning, like Rachel Lears, but just some amazing new talent, which is exciting to see.
It is exciting to see, and really, we've been able to cover a wide variety of films right here, and I've enjoyed, as I mentioned at the top of the show, all of the shows I've been able to watch, and you have even more films that you're going to be watching throughout the festival.
Absolutely, and definitely check out the shorts. I feel like shorts get kind of short shrift, pardon the pun, because they're not often shown in a theatrical environment, but they are amazing, and these are really the emerging talents. I mean, to be able to tell that story in 9 minutes is amazingly complicated. So, check out the shorts. The features, of course, are fantastic. But, these are the people to watch, generally in the short section.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I love the shorts, and I feel like what a challenge to be able to, like you mentioned, to get your story across in such a short amount of time. And really, these are emerging filmmakers that do big things. So.
Absolutely.
So much is happening right here. So grateful, Katy, that you could join us. I really enjoy your interviews and your questions with filmmakers. It really provides a whole nother aspect into what we do here, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and don't worry, we've got a lot of films to bring back here to Park City.
We absolutely do. In the meantime, we'll see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. Have a great day.